My name's James, for anyone that doesn't know me, and I'm a product manager here at Synology UK. Today we're going to be looking at virtualization with Synology, and I'll say with Synology because we are looking at how we can integrate with different platforms in today's webinar. So before we kind of get started, I guess there's three really key ideas, key questions that we need to be talking about, we need to be thinking about when dealing with virtualization. And that is, well, first and foremost, what is virtualization? How can it help my my organization? We then need to actually look at how we can enhance existing virtualization solutions. And then we also need to do is take a look at how we can protect and recover workflows with these virtualization platforms. So let's start right at the start and go, well, what is virtualization? A very nice kind of background on this. Well, you might have a number of different systems that are running in your organization. So a mail server, a database server, file servers. I mean, as you can see on screen, there's a number of different services that you might be looking to utilize. However, having a discrete system for each of these is potentially going to be quite costly. It's also going to take up a lot of space, and it's also not going to be very scalable or instantly scalable, as you might have to, when you want to add another workload, another work type, you will have to obviously create an entire new piece of hardware to be able to run this on. And so this is where virtualization comes in. So instead of having these being individual systems, what we can do is we can combine these to run on a server in a hypervisor. So we'll have our server, which is running a hypervisor, and then all of our workloads are running within that. And of course, this means that there's a number of benefits, but it also means you can scale much, much easier. Well, what are some of the other key ideas? Well, of course, we've got storage efficiency. So being able to scale everything into one system is going to compress that physical data, the physical kind of systems. But also it's going to enable us to get much more efficient with our digital storage as well. We're able to drive the cost effectiveness up, so reducing the costs, having only one system to manage. And then again, alongside that, we've also got the ease of management as well. So being able to have everything in one place means that your IT team is not going to be juggling several different systems. They're able to just look in one place and see the entire workflow and infrastructure for the organization. So we've taken a look at what virtualization is and how it's really key for organizations to progress and grow. But how does Synology support existing virtualization platforms? Well, there's two really kind of key aspects. So we've got storage and we've got backup. But let's take a look at the storage aspects first and foremost. Well, again, here there's some really key fundamentals that we need to be thinking about in virtualization storage. So we need it to be flexible. We need to accommodate all the different workflows that we've just discussed. Maybe you need a database server. Well, that's going to need quite a high I/O workflow. Maybe you need a VPN server. Well, that's quite a low I/O intensity. But maybe you also have an archive server that's going to need to store cold data for maybe 2, 3, 5 years at a time. And so we need to be able to flexibly accommodate all of these different workflows. We also need the integration. So maybe you're using VMware, maybe you're using Hyper-V. We need to be able to integrate with both of these platforms, but also any potential future platforms that you're looking to maybe bring into the business going forwards, but also any legacy systems as well that are still in use, that are still performing those really critical tasks that also need to be supported. And then lastly, we also need to look at data protection, so how we can actually make sure we can protect all of that data, but also the systems themselves from any vulnerabilities. Now, of course, to combat all of these different considerations, there's two main ways we can look at this. We've got a hardware level, we've got a software level as well. So we take a look at the hardware. Well, of course, we've got loads of different platforms within the Synology ecosystem. So we've got all flash arrays built on the full flash station systems, allowing you to optimize for SSD workflows. We've got the high scalability with the SA and the HD range of systems, scaling from maybe 20, 30 terabytes, all the way up to potentially 2, 3, 5 petabytes at a time. And then we've also got redundancy as well. So the UC in the SAD series, being able to have redundancy and resiliency in the hardware itself, meaning that we'll always have access to that data. Now, these are some of the hardware kind of concepts that we need to think about. But what are some of the software concepts? Well, of course, we've got data deduplication. So this is combining all of those multiple blocks that are stored on a storage volume on Synology SSD and reducing that to just storing one of those. So, of course, this means, as you can see there, we're able to reduce up to 65% of the total kind of capacity on that system. And actually, we're able to now do this both online and offline. So you can do it as the data is being written to get that reduction right at the start. But also, if you wanted to do it offline, being able to have a schedule. So each day, it will automatically dedupe everything at that point, meaning that you can flexibly and control when it's going to do that task to allow you to make sure you've got the best performance when you need it. We've also got the petabyte scalability. So with HD and SA range of systems, being able to scale as high as you need, but also some of the really kind of key fundamentals that this has brought in, such as peta volume and snapshotting and aspects like that, that are really key when talking about larger and larger data sets, but also talking about some of the kind of the lower level aspects, so RAID groups and aspects like that, to enable you to have redundancy and resiliency on each of the hardware levels as well. But taking that kind of resiliency, that redundancy one step further is obviously the Synology high availability platforms. So being able to have a HA cluster of either, a Plus series all the way up to an FS means that you can get all of the benefits of what I've mentioned previously, but in any of the single platforms. Or alternatively, if you wanted to go with a active SAN, we've got the UC range as well, which of course being primarily focused on iSCSI and fiber channel block storage technologies, it means that you can actually get a better integration, a better performance from like-for-like hardware as well. And then, of course, we also need to have that integration with the other platforms. So Synology, we're a VMware ready, Hyper-V ready, Citrix and OpenStack compatible storage platform, along with Kubernetes as well. So I mentioned those platforms actually. Let's kind of take a look at how we can set up an iSCSI target and then how we can connect VMware into that. Now I'm choosing VMware because it typically is the platform that we see most common, but also it is probably one of the biggest platforms for virtualization globally. So what we'll do first, we need to set up our LUN on our NAS. So here in DSM, what I can do is I can open up SAN Manager and we can create a new LUN. Now here we'll just leave the default name, but we'll make sure we've got a relatively healthy capacity of 100 gigs. And we're going to use iSCSI for this as well. And then once we're happy with all of those settings, we'll just click done. Now, from Synology side, that's it. This is pretty simple. We can double check that our iSCSI target is available, but everything else we need to jump into VMware. So what we'll do under networking, we'll create a new standard switch. So we'll just call this Synology switch. And both this and the VM kernel is going to be able to provide that kind of bridge between the data stores and the Synology iSCSI storage. So now we can see that we've got our Synology switch. We'll create a VM kernel NIC and assign it to the group port. So here what we'll do, we'll give this a quick name, Synology port group. There we go. And we'll also define a static IP address as well. So we'll just set this to something very similar, 10.20.0.93. and give it a subnet mask as with the rest of our network. So there we go. And once we're happy with that, we'll just actually enable provisioning, just so we've got a bit kind of future-proofness on this, and we'll click create. Now, as you can see here, that's created. And if we go back to virtual switches, we can now see that the Synology switch has a port group, which means that we've actually got connection through both of these virtual devices. Now, to go further, what we need to do is we need to switch into the storage tab and we need to find our software adapter for iSCSI. So if we open up the software iSCSI, we can see that we've got the Synology port group and IP address already set up here. And what we'll do, we'll add a dynamic target. So this is going to be the IP address of our NAS, so 10.20.0.115. We'll save that and we'll just give it a quick rescan. And now that's hopefully scanned. There we go. So what we can do is we can go back into the configuration and it will have found our static target there. So just clicked on the wrong one. But we'll also just double check we've got our settings that we need. So there's a couple of things that we just want to check. So such as the login timeout and the log out timeout, excuse me. And also we'll force enable delayed ACK as well, just as those are some of the recommendations from what we found to be some of the best performance on when using Synology with VMware. Now, once we're happy with those settings, we'll click Save. We'll save that configuration. And we can then go in and start creating our data store. So we'll open up the Data Stores tab. We'll create a new data store, a new VMFS data store. And with a bit of luck, if it loads, ooh, there we go. So we can now see our Synology iSCSI disk. So we'll give this a name. And just like creating a disk within Windows, within any other kind of local storage on Hyper-V or VMware, we'll just give that a name. And once we're happy with that, that should hopefully show up in our list. And we're now able to start utilizing that as our storage location for any virtual machines that we want to build in VMware. Now, a really interesting and kind of useful use case for this was actually Drakewell on behalf of Transport for London. Now, Transport for London obviously run a number of different transport networks across the Greater London area. But here what we're doing is we're focusing on the M25 smart motorways. We're not going to get into smart motorways, whether they're good or bad. That's another point. But what we're doing here is actually managing the variable speed limits in virtual machines that are being run and hosted in Drakewell's data center. Now, the key aspect here is, yes, they are using VMware, but they're using Synology as the storage. So if we look at our topology, we've got VMware. They're running their virtual machines. They've got 20 virtual machines. And what they utilize is a high availability pair of FS6400 NAS, which they actually utilize NFS 4.1. Now, they don't use traditional iSCSI because that is a block storage kind of technology. They utilize NFS, a file storage technology. Now, why do they do this? Well, there's a number of different reasons, but the primary one is it means that they offload storage management to the NAS rather than having that done by VMware and the virtual machines. Now, this means that they can break up those workloads and actually reduce the latency to that storage on the FS6400s. So they actually have quoted, VMware isn't actually able to detect the storage latency. We know it's about 1 millisecond, but that's only because it shows up in Synology's DSM operating system. But as I say, VMware is not able to detect the low latency of that storage. So we've taken a look at the storage aspects. Now let's actually take a look at the backup and the data protection aspects for how we can protect these virtualization workloads. Well, there's two subcategories to this. We need to look at the backup strategy. We also need to look at the restoration strategy. Now, of course, the primary key software we're going to need to use here is, of course, Active Backup for Business, the best software that we've ever made. As the backup PM, I am in no way biased. But this allows us to back up our PCs, our physical servers, our virtual machines, and our file servers all onto one platform. Now, of course, we're focusing on the virtual machines. So how does that work? Well, it is an agentless backup of these virtual machines. So we can connect into Hyper-V and VMware, both agentlessly, meaning that you don't have to install anything in VMware or Hyper-V or any of the virtual machines, and everything can be managed from one single portal. Now, this also comes with some of the additional benefits like block level deduplication, which is obviously both cross-platform, but also cross-device as well. So we can reduce the amount of data that's being stored on the system. And again, you can see deduplication rates up to 65% as well. Now we can take this one step further. We can utilize snapshot replication and Hyper-V to be able to replicate this off to both local NASs doing backups, but also offsite NASs doing backups, depending on the backup strategy we want to discuss. Now, if you have any questions about this, please do feel free to drop a mention in the chat, or come and see me afterwards, and we can help assist with that. Now, we've got our backup strategy that we're comfortable with. We need to look at the restoration strategies. Now, with Active Backup for Business, there's a number of different ways that we can achieve this, but we've also got the granular restoration portal that is really key for Active Backup. Now, this allows us to do file, multiple files, or even folder level restorations back into the VMs without any downtime. Of course, making sure we've got that RTO as low as possible, that recovery time objective. Now, what happens if the actual VMs themselves fail? Well, this is where we've got a couple of different strategies that we can also look at. So let's take a look at one of those. Well, we've got our production server running VMware, running our virtual machines. We've got 1, 2, and 3. What happens if VM2 goes down? Well, what we can do is we can do a full VM image restoration. Now, this means we're going to take the issue fixing, so actually fixing the issue within that virtual machine. We'll then take the restoration time of moving all of that data back onto the production server, and then we'll take the time to actually boot it up. Now, this means that actually potentially that RTO, the time it takes to recover, could be quite a long time. It could be potentially a couple of hours if we've got a large virtual machine. And so that's not always going to be the best method. What we might want to do instead is look at instant restoration. It's very similar to begin with. So we've got our VM that goes down. We can then actually, instead of moving the entire VM from the backup server onto the production server, we can actually just mount the backup image via NFS from the Synology onto the VMware production server. And this does work with Hyper-V as well. And that means that actually our RTO is, instead of being potentially hours, it's reduced to just minutes, as all we need to do is mount that storage volume and then just spin up the virtual machine. All it takes is just the time to boot it up. And actually, we'll come back to that in a minute. But what happens if we don't have access to the production server? Well, I'm sure you guys have seen this a couple of times before, but it's always worth pointing out because it's a really key idea and technology that's really useful for organizations should the entire production server goes down. And that is, of course, utilizing Virtual Machine Manager, Synology's built-in hypervisor, to power up those critical infrastructure components as soon as possible. Now, once these VMs are back up and running and we've got our production server back up and going again, we can use vMotion to transfer everything back into VMware. With Hyper-V, it's a little bit more complicated, but you can achieve a similar kind of effect to that. Now, I mentioned we're looking at that instant restoration. Well, let's actually take a look at how we might be able to achieve that. So here we are. We've got our virtual machines running in VMware. And I've noticed that actually one of those, Workshop 1, has had a couple of issues. So actually, I don't even need to sign into VMware. I can do everything from the Active Backup panel. So what we can do on the DSM is we can open up Active Backup for Business. We can navigate to our virtual machines. So here we go. Workshop 1 is the one that I want to restore. We can choose the backup we want to restore from and where we want to restore to, VMware or Hyper-V. We can then do an instant restore or a full VM restore, and we can do it back to the original location. Now, I'd select the power on VM automatically because that means that it's going to be one less click for us to do. And actually, as you can see here, it's just going to replace that virtual machine in place. And there you go. It's simple as that. Picks up straight where we left off. On VMware, we can select that virtual machine, and there we go. It's all fully booted, and we can start taking it. We can start utilizing that exactly where we left off of beforehand. So yeah, we've taken a look at a number of different ways we can look at data protection of our virtualization platforms. So of course, we've got the protection of the SANs themselves using Snapshot, using Hyper Backup to do those protections. We've got the VM backups using Active Backup to help protect the actual workloads themselves. And then we've got the hardware level redundancy using high availability if we needed to. So to build a bit of a topology, just to help make it a bit clearer, I know it always helps when I see it like this. We have our production server, which we can then store our, utilize our NAS as our storage server for these VMs. But actually, we can take this one step further, and we can use a HA cluster using Synology high availability. And then we can protect each of these workloads with snapshot replication to a NAS that's running on site. We can use hyper backup to back up to an off-site NAS or to a USB device to have that true offline backup. And then we can utilize active backup for business as well to protect the individual workloads themselves, meaning that, yes, we're actually able to have a full 3-2-1 protection, all with Synology. So if we take a thought back to the questions we posed right at the start, well, what is virtualization? Well, it allows us to consolidate the workloads onto a single platform to enable easier management and reduction in costs. We're able to reduce the latency in terms of protecting and enhancing existing virtualization workflows and scalability with Synology. And then in terms of the data protection aspect, you can protect your virtualization platform, the full 3-2-1 ability on one console with active backup for business. So I will pose a question just to finish, and that is, well, are you ready to enhance your infrastructure with Synology? If you are, please do get in touch with us. We've got a bit of a kind of just a little form here just to say what you're looking to do, and that will allow you to schedule a call with one of our consultants, one of our solution specialists, who will be able to help build a solution